One, the black sedan pulled up to the edge of town on my 18th birthday. It belonged to Warren Hayes. The car was polished to a mirror shine. The driver, dressed in a crisp suit, stepped out and carefully checked the ground before treading on the dusty shoulder of the road. He walked over to me. "Caleb Hayes? Mr. Hayes sent me to bring you home." I got in, tossing a single canvas duffel bag onto the seat beside me. Inside were 2 changes of clothes and the $500 the man who raised me had pressed into my hand. "Go on," he'd said. "That's your real family." We drove for 4 hours, the road transforming from gravel and dirt to smooth blacktop, the landscape shifting from single-story farmhouses to towering skyscrapers. I leaned back against the genuine leather, watching the glittering buildings slide past the window, and felt nothing. My foster dad had it wrong. This wasn't my home. It was just the place my blood came from. The Hayes estate was even bigger than I'd imagined. A set of wrought iron gates slid open automatically. The car glided down a long driveway lined with majestic oak trees and stopped in front of a 3-story European-style mansion. I followed the butler into the main hall. A crystal chandelier, hanging from a 20-foot ceiling, flooded the cavernous space with light, bright as day. The floors were polished marble. 3 people were sitting in the hall. My mother, Eleanor Hayes, sat on the main sofa. She was impeccably preserved, her face as delicate and flawless as a portrait. She was stunningly beautiful. You'd mistake her for a college student, not a woman who'd had children. My sister, Chloe Hayes, was curled in a nearby armchair, scrolling through her phone with one leg crossed over the other. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her features were a close echo of Eleanor's. And then there was Ethan Hayes, the impostor, standing by the grand staircase. He looked to be in his early 20s, with a handsome, clean-cut face. But his eyes were wrong. When he looked at you, it was like he was weighing you, sizing you up. His eyes darted around like a fox scoping out a henhouse, all while he tried to project an air of harmless innocence. Eleanor's gaze swept over me, from my unkempt hair down to my worn-out boots. Her brow furrowed slightly. "You're Caleb?" "Yeah. 18 years out there." "It must have been difficult," she said, her tone as detached as if she were discussing the weather. "But you're back now. This is your home." I didn't answer. Ethan walked over from the staircase, a wide, practiced smile on his face. He extended a hand. "Welcome home, brother. Aimetan. It's great to finally meet you." I just looked at him, leaving his hand hanging in the air. It stayed there for 3, maybe 4 seconds before he awkwardly pulled it back. The smile didn't falter. If anything, it deepened. He took 2 steps back, resuming his post by the staircase, hands folded in front of him, head slightly bowed. The posture was so perfect it looked rehearsed, shoulders relaxed, chin tucked, eyes glancing up from under his lashes. It was a masterful display of humility and manufactured hurt. Chloe didn't even look up from her phone. A flick of her thumb across the screen was accompanied by a single, cutting remark. "Figures he was raised in the sticks." Eleanor didn't respond, but she didn't contradict her either. The butler, an older man named Mr. Peterson, stood stiffly in the corner. He had to be in his 60s, but his posture was ramrod straight. Silence hung in the air for a few moments. Then Ethan moved. He fell down the stairs. The motion was so fluid it could have been choreographed. His left foot caught his right, his body pitched forward, and his hand flailed in the air with a short, startled cry. He tumbled down 2 marble steps, his shoulder hitting the floor with a sickening thud. He lay on his side, his face instantly draining of color. His shoulders trembled, his eyes reddened, and tears clung to his lashes, refusing to fall. He looked like a kitten someone had just stepped on. Eleanor shot up from the sofa and rushed to his side, scooping him into her arms. "Ethan!" He collapsed against her shoulder, his lips trembling, unable to speak. He just shook his head. Mr. Peterson took 1 step forward, his head still bowed. His voice was just loud enough for everyone to hear. It was the young Mr. Caleb. He pushed him. Without another word, or even a glance up, he retreated back to his corner. Eleanor's head snapped toward me, her expression transformed. The polite, distant warmth from moments ago had erupted into a raging fire. One arm cradling Ethan, she pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice sharp and shrill. "Caleb, you've been here 5 minutes, and you're already showing your true, vicious colors. Nestled in her arms, Ethan let out a tiny sob, his voice a pathetic whimper. Mom, don't blame him. Maybe he didn't mean to. He put the slightest emphasis on the word, maybe, his eyes darting toward me for a split second. I don't want to cause any trouble for him. His voice trailed off, as if choked with emotion. If he can't stand having me here, I can leave. Eleanor's eyes welled up. She hugged Ethan tighter, patting his back comfortingly. It's okay, sweetheart, it's okay, she murmured before glaring at me, her eyes like daggers. Get on your knees. Apologize to your brother. Chloe finally put down her phone, a small smirk playing on her lips as she leaned back to enjoy the show. Her gaze flickered from my face to Ethan, and she shook her head almost imperceptibly. Everyone in the room was staring at me. Ethan was still huddled in Eleanor's embrace, his shoulders shaking. But the rhythm of his trembling had changed. It wasn't the shudder of shock anymore. It was the tremor of suppressed laughter. I stood my ground, a bitter smile almost breaking through. This guy's seen too many movies. This whole family is a train wreck. And the butler's obviously been paid off. I'll remember him. I've got plenty of ways to deal with a guy like that. Eleanor's voice climbed an octave. I said, get on your knees. Are you deaf? Did growing up wild for 18 years strip you of any basic decency? Today, I'll teach you the manners your foster father clearly failed to. When she spat the words foster father, her lip curled as if she were tasting something foul. I looked at Ethan. He was still shaking. The sight of his smug, deceitful face made me sick. I started walking toward them. Eleanor instinctively pulled Ethan behind her, but my eyes were locked on him. I stopped right in front of them. He looked up, his expression caught mid-transition. The corners of his mouth were still turned up in a smirk, even as his eyebrows were angled in a perfect picture of sorrow. I raised my hand. Eleanor shrieked. What do you think you're doing? Slap. It was a clean, solid hit. My palm connected with his left cheek. As my fingers closed, his head snapped to the side, his entire body lurching with the force of it. His head nearly collided with Eleanor's chin. Ethan crumpled to the floor. The side of his face began to swell instantly, a dark red mark blooming on his skin. A cut split open at the corner of his mouth, and a trickle of blood dripped onto the white marble. He clutched his face, his eyes wide with disbelief, his lips trembling for real this time, not from an act, but from pure, unexpected pain. He never thought I'd actually hit him. The tears finally fell, genuine and hot, splashing onto the floor. Eleanor was stunned into silence for 2 seconds. Then she let out a piercing scream that could have shattered glass. You're insane. You're insane. Security. Where is security? Chloe shot to her feet, her phone clattering to the floor unnoticed. She stared at the red handprint on Ethan's face, her mouth slightly agape. Mr. Peterson took a step forward, then thought better of it and retreated. Ethan, on the floor, looked up at me. The carefully constructed mask of victimhood, of noble suffering, was completely shattered. I shook my hand, the palm stinging. If I had really pushed him, I said, my voice calm, do you think he'd still be able to talk? Eleanor stood between us, shaking, pointing a trembling finger at the door. Get out. Get out of my house. I'll pretend I never gave birth to you. I glanced at her, almost laughing. If I'm some bastard, what does that make her? Mrs. Hayes, I said coolly, I never planned on staying. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Ethan's voice, low and choked with tears, but every word was crystal clear. Mom, let go. I don't blame him, really. It was my fault. I was clumsy. Even after I'd slapped him across the face, he was still playing the martyr, still defending me. It was incredible that this family could produce such a creature. What a good boy. What a disgusting child. I walked out of the main hall. Behind me, the sounds of Eleanor's furious sobs and Ethan's placating murmurs blended together. I didn't look back. My foster dad was right. That wasn't my home. The next morning, a call came from Warren Hayes. The phone vibrated under my pillow for the 3rd time before I finally reached for it. Mr. Caleb, Mr. Hayes would like you to come to the office. It was the butler, Mr. Peterson. The car is on its way. It will be there in 20 minutes. Before I could say a word, he hung up. That kind of butler, working for this family? It was incredible what the Hayeses put up with. I was lying in bed at a Motel 6 I'd found after leaving the mansion. $150 a night. 20 minutes later, the black sedan pulled up to the curb. Same driver, same polished leather shoes hitting the pavement before the rest of him emerged. He glanced at the motel's sign, his expression unchanging, but I saw his eyelid twitch. I didn't say a word to him, just pulled open the back door and got in. This drive was shorter, only 20 minutes to the Hayes Corporation building. It was a skyscraper, over 30 stories of reflective glass, with two massive pillars flanking the entrance like sentinels. 2 security guards stood watch. The receptionist was a young woman who gave me a quick, dismissive once-over as I walked in. Her eyes lingered for a second on my faded t-shirt before she picked up her phone, murmured something, and then hung up. She gestured toward the elevators without even bothering to speak. The elevator opened on the top floor. A lawyer, Mr. Davies, was waiting for me outside an office door. He was in his 40s, with gold-rimmed glasses and a manila envelope tucked under his arm. He gave me a curt nod and pushed the door open. Warren Hayes was sitting behind a massive desk. He looked to be in his early 50s. He didn't stand, didn't even look up. He just jutted his chin toward the chair opposite him. Seat. I didn't. I stood in front of his desk. Mr. Davies placed the manila envelope on the desk and stepped back. Warren finally lifted his head to look at me. It was a fleeting glance, the kind you give to make sure the right person is in the chair, before his eyes returned to the papers in front of him. The only sound in the office was the rustle of him turning pages. When he finished, he squared the papers and pushed them to the center of the desk. Sign it. His voice was flat, as if he were saying, file this report. I looked down. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, were the words, Inheritance Renunciation Agreement. The third clause was crystal clear. Party A, Caleb Hayes, voluntarily forfeits all rights of inheritance to the Hayes Corporation and its associated enterprises. Party B, the Hayes Corporation, will provide a one-time payment of $1 million to Party A. Hereafter, both parties are absolved of all mutual obligations. I picked up the agreement and glanced at the second page. The language was precise, transactional. It was a bill of sale for my own blood. Warren's voice cut through the silence. What's so funny? I didn't answer. I put the papers back on the desk and slid them across the polished wood until they were right in front of him. He frowned. This $1 million, I asked, does that include a little extra for Ethan's medical bills? Warren's frown deepened, the corners of his mouth turning down. Caleb, he said, his voice low and heavy, you need to understand something. The only reason you're standing in this room is because my blood runs through your veins. Without that, you are nothing. I didn't press the issue of you hitting Ethan yesterday, not because you were right, but because I don't like messy situations. He looked up at me, his eyes cold, like he was reviewing a disappointing quarterly report. But you need to know that this family isn't a revolving door. You sign this agreement today, take the money, and walk away. It's the best outcome for you, for the family, and for Ethan. Best for Ethan, you mean? I corrected him. Honestly, this whole family was unbelievable. Kicking out your own son for a foster kid? Some heir to the family business. If his own grandfather, who I've never even met, knew about this, he'd probably slap him silly. Warren's jaw tightened. He tapped a finger on the edge of the papers. $1 million will set you up very comfortably, he said. You grew up in that town, didn't you? $1 million could build you 3 houses back there. The way he said that town, with a slight contemptuous lift at the end, made it sound like a dirty word. I looked at his face. Mr. Hayes, I began, you abandoned me in a backwater town for 18 years. Then, when you decide your biological son might be useful, you bring me back. On the first day, the perfect son you raised for 2 decades stages a fall down the stairs. Your wife calls me a bastard, and your daughter says I have no class. On the second day, you offer me $1 million to get lost. Warren's expression hardened. And you call this the best outcome? I picked up the agreement and waved it in front of him. You call this dignity? Warren's hands flattened on the desk. Mr. Davies cleared his throat and took a step forward. Mr. Hayes, the terms of this agreement are, I shot him a look. Was I talking to you? He shut his mouth. Warren stood up. He pointed a finger at the door, his voice a low growl. Either sign it and take the money, or you walk out of here with nothing. Your choice. I picked up the pen from his desk. I saw a flicker in his eyes. Not relief, but the subconscious relaxing of a man who thinks he's won. I uncapped the pen and signed my name on the agreement. Caleb Hayes. Each letter was neat and deliberate. Warren glanced down at the signature, then back up at me. I took the $1 million check from the desk. Mr. Hayes, I said, folding it twice and tucking it into my pocket, $1 million to buy out my connection to your bloodline. Seems like a bargain to me. Warren sank back in his chair, silent. But let me give you a piece of advice, I said, turning to leave. I stopped at the door and looked back at him. Your perfect son isn't what he seems. The way he looks at people is exactly the same as you, always calculating what they're worth. Warren's fingers drummed twice on the tabletop. I pulled open the door. The plush hallway carpet swallowed the sound of my footsteps. Mr. Davies followed me out. Mr. Hayes, he called after me. I didn't turn back. $1 million. To sever a bloodline. What a cheap price. The elevator reached the ground floor. When the doors opened, the receptionist looked up at me again. This time, her gaze didn't just skim past. It lingered. I ignored her and pushed through the glass doors. Standing on the sidewalk below the Hayes Corporation Tower, I looked up at the 30-plus stories of gleaming glass. Warren Hayes sat at the very top. Eleanor and Ethan were in their mansion. Chloe was lounging on a sofa, scrolling through her phone. They were a family, and I had just sold my last connection to them for $1 million. 3 months later, I was in the lab at the university organizing data when my phone vibrated. I picked it up. An unknown number, local area code. I answered. Caleb. It was Chloe's voice, with a hint of forced familiarity. It's me, your sister. What do you want? Why so hostile? Can't I just check up on my little brother? She laughed lightly. I heard you're doing well at the Institute. Professor Miller's research group, right? I didn't reply. She didn't seem to mind, continuing on. I'm in the area with a friend. Thought I'd stop by and see you. The cafe at your research building is supposed to be nice. I'll see you there in a bit. I didn't say. She'd already hung up. I stare at the call log on my screen and save the number under a new contact, Chloe Hayes. 10 minutes later, I was at the campus cafe. I spotted her the moment I walked in. Chloe was sitting by the window, wearing a white sundress, her hair down. She looked like she was in the middle of a magazine photo shoot. Sitting across from her was Ethan. He was wearing a light blue button-down, the collar buttoned neatly, the same practiced smile on his face. The swelling on his left cheek was gone, but if you looked closely, you could still see a faint bruise just below the cheekbone. I turned to leave. Caleb, Chloe's voice called out from behind me. Stop right there. I paused and looked back at her. You're already here. Is it going to kill you to sit down for a minute? She pointed to the empty chair across from her. I already ordered you a coffee. I glanced at the cup, then at Ethan, and walked over and sat down. Ethan gave me a nod, his tone perfectly calibrated for timid sincerity. Hey, brother. Long time no see. I'm not your brother. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. Chloe pushed the coffee toward me. Try it. The beans are from Ethiopia. Very hard to get. I didn't touch it. You haven't contacted the family in a month, Chloe said, leaning back and crossing her legs. Mom said you blocked her number. I've blocked a lot of people. Beside her, Ethan let out a soft chuckle, so quiet you wouldn't have heard it if you weren't sitting right there. Caleb, he began, his eyes once again holding that watery, earnest look. I'm actually the one who wanted to see you today. About what happened last time. I've been wanting to apologize. I stared at him. His long eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks as he looked down. His voice was low and slightly nasal, like someone just getting over a cold. It was my fault that day I fell on my own. I never should have let Mom misunderstand. I've been thinking about it all month, and I feel terrible about how it all went down. His eyelid twitched when he said he fell on his own. He extended his hand across the table. Caleb, can you forgive me? I stared at his hand. Chloe watched from the side, a smug little smile on her face. Ethan, he answered instinctively. Yeah. When you fell down the stairs a month ago, I asked, did you trip over your left foot or your right? His expression froze. My left, he guessed. Wrong. Then my right. Wrong again. Chloe put down her coffee cup, her smile fading slightly. Ethan's fingers twitched on the tabletop, but he didn't pull his hand back. His smile remained, but the look in his eyes had changed. The moisture was gone, replaced by a dry, calculating glint. Caleb, why are you keeping track of things like that? He forced a laugh. I was so dazed from the fall. I have no idea which foot it was. I remember for you, I said flatly. You tripped your right foot with your left. Your body fell forward into the right, your right hand grabbed at the air, and you landed on your left shoulder after tumbling down 2 steps. Ethan's smile vanished completely. His lips pressed into a thin line, the muscles in his jaw clenching. The moisture in his eyes was completely gone, replaced by something cold and hard as stone. Right before you fell, you glanced to your left to check the position of the staircase. Then you started your fall. I continued. It was a very professional-looking stunt. You must have practiced it a few times, right? Ethan snatched his hand back from the table. He placed it on his lap, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his pants. Chloe's voice turned icy. Caleb, what's your point? No point, I said, leaning back in my chair. I just think your brother's a talented actor. I was hoping for some pointers. Ethan lowered his head. His shoulders started to tremble, but this time it wasn't an act. It was real, born out of fear, of the raw fury of being exposed. He lifted his head. The mask was gone. No more victim, no more noble suffering, no more magnanimity. The watery innocence had evaporated, revealing a fire of pure rage. Caleb, his voice had changed, losing its gentle, suppressed quality. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm nobody, I said. Just a guy you framed. Framed? He let out a sharp, cold laugh, like nails on a chalkboard. What proof do you have that I framed you? Mr. Peterson saw you push me. My mother knows you pushed me. What do you have? Just your word. Then why are you here today? I shot back. To apologize? What for? Didn't you just say you fell by accident? He was speechless. Chloe stood up, grabbed her coffee cup, and threw the contents at me. That's enough, she said, her voice frigid, her chin held high. Ethan came here in good faith to apologize, and you not only refused to accept it, you sit here being a sarcastic ass. Who do you think you are? Some kid from the sticks who thinks he's hot stuff after a few days of college. I looked down at the coffee stains spreading across my shoulder. Chloe, I said, standing up to face her. A month ago you said I had no class. Today, you throw coffee on me. Is this the famous Hayes family class? Her face flushed with anger. Ethan also stood, stepping in front of Chloe, his chin jutting out defiantly. Watch your mouth, Caleb, he said, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. You think you're something special because you got that $1 million? Let me tell you something. I'm the one who told Dad to give you that money. If I hadn't put in a good word for you with Mom, you wouldn't have gotten a damn cent. He took a step forward, poking a finger into my chest. You're nothing to this family. You're nothing in this city. You're just a... I grabbed a finger jabbing my chest and twisted. Hard. Before the scream could fully escape his throat, my other hand was already moving. Crack. The sound of the slap was even louder than the first time. The entire cafe went silent. Ethan stumbled sideways, knocking over an empty glass on the next table. It rolled to the floor and shattered. His left cheek swelled up again, the half-healed cut at the corner of his mouth splitting open once more. He fell to the floor, clutching his face, looking up at me. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by pure, primal fear. Chloe let out a strangled gasp and stumbled back, hitting the wall behind her. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the ground. I crouched down to his level. His lips were trembling. His whole face was trembling. Tears streamed down his cheeks again, and this time, there was no doubt they were real. Ethan, I said, my voice low just for him. The first time, I hit you to teach you not to act. The second time, I hit you to teach you to stay out of my way. The third time, I held up 3 fingers in front of his face. The third time, I won't be aiming for your face. I don't know who I am, but you're just a fake. Who do you think you are? If the old man knew an outsider was trying to take over the inheritance, you think you'd live long? His pupils contracted. I stood up, took a couple of napkins from the dispenser on our table, and wiped the coffee from my shoulder. The napkin turned a dark brown. I crumpled it into a ball and threw it on the table. Chloe was still pressed against the wall, her lips pale, unable to speak. I looked at her. Go back and tell Warren Hayes not to send you two to find me again. Or next time, it'll be more than just a slap. I turned and walked toward the door. The barista was hiding behind the counter, her eyes wide. As I passed, I gave her a nod. Sorry about the mess. Put the 2 broken glasses on my tab. She shook her head, then nodded, then disappeared completely behind the counter. I pushed open the door and walked out of the cafe. My palm was stinging. The laws of physics are a bitch. But this time was different. This time I was smiling. Not from happiness. From sheer, bitter absurdity of it all. 3 nights after the incident at the cafe, I was in my apartment eating ramen when my phone rang. I didn't have the number saved, but the area code was for the wealthy suburb where the Hayes mansion was located. I ignored it. It rang 4 times, then stopped. Then it started again. On the 5th try, I finally answered. Caleb. Eleanor's voice exploded through the speaker, sharp and piercing like a nail scraping across glass. Are you insane? You beat Ethan like that. His face has been swollen for 3 days. He needed 2 stitches in his lip. How would you do that to him? I held the phone away from my ear, set on the table, and switched on the speakerphone. Answer me, she shrieked. I'm telling you, Caleb, if you don't give me an explanation, this isn't over. Who do you think you are? You think you can just assault him and get away with it? Let me tell you. Are you done? I asked, taking a bite of my noodles. You. She was momentarily choked up, but she quickly recovered, her voice rising even higher. What is this attitude? I am your mother. Mrs. Hayes, I said after swallowing, that's not what you were saying a month ago when you told me to get out. The line went quiet for a few seconds. You were the one who started it that day. Her voice wavered, but then hardened again. You hit him the moment you returned, and you think you're in the right? I hit him because he deserved it. He deserved it? How'd he deserve it? He's lived in this family for 20 years and has never caused a moment of trouble. Never given me a single thing to worry about. And you? You come back and attack him on the first day, and on the second, you're demanding money from your father. Demanding money. I put down my fork. That $1 million was Warren Hayes' price to buy out my bloodline. You call that demanding money. Whatever you call it, you took it. Her voice began to tremble, not with rage this time, but with the unsteadiness of someone whose weak point has been struck. You took the money, so you have no right to come back and cause trouble. You assault someone and refuse to admit you're wrong. Have you no conscience? I caused trouble. I leaned back in my chair. Mrs. Hayes, your daughter called me. Your son came to my university to find me. I was perfectly fine in my lab, and they dragged me to that cafe, insisting on apologizing. Apologize for what? For framing me by throwing himself down the stairs and then showing up a month later to make amends? He didn't frame you. Mr. Peterson saw it with his own eyes. How much did Ethan pay Mr. Peterson? Have you looked into that? The other end of the line went completely silent. I could hear Eleanor's breathing, heavy and labored, like she'd just run a marathon. What did you say? Her voice had changed. The shrill, shrewish tone was gone, replaced by a low, uncertain tremor. I said, your butler, Mr. Peterson. How long has he worked for the family? 10 years? 20? What's his monthly salary? Enough to build a new house back home? Did Ethan give him that house? Or just hand him a pile of cash? You're lying, she shrieked again, but there was no conviction in it. Mr. Peterson has been with us for 23 years. He watched Ethan grow up. He would never what? Never lie. Mrs. Hayes, when your son fell down those stairs, where was Mr. Peterson standing? What did he possibly see from there? Go back and ask him. From the corner he was in, the top of the staircase isn't even visible. He didn't see a thing, yet he was so quick to say I pushed him. Why do you think he was so certain? Eleanor didn't speak. I heard a faint gulp on her end of the line. Do you have any proof? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. I don't have proof, I said, but I have eyes. And so do you. You just don't want to see. There was a soft rustle, like she was switching the phone to her other hand. Caleb, her voice was suddenly soft, so soft it was almost unrecognizable. Come back. We could talk about this. I'll speak to your father. Mrs. Hayes, I cut her off. A minute ago, you were calling me insane, conscienceless, a brute. Did you once, even once, ask me if I'd been wronged? Not a single time. Your son falls down the stairs, and without a second thought, you demand I get on my knees. Your son comes looking for trouble in my university, and without asking who was right or wrong, you call to scream at me. In your heart, there's only one person. The perfect son you raised for 20 years. What am I to you? Her voice cracked, half shout, half sob, as if someone had grabbed her by the throat. You're not a thing. You are my son. The son you gave birth to, but never raised, I shot back, walking over to the window. The son you convicted without a trial. The son you paid $1 million to get rid of. Mrs. Hayes, is it your definition of being a mother? Besides, you call me a bastard. What does that make you? I was, her voice was choppy like a bad connection. I was angry. You were angry? I let out a short, harsh laugh. And what about now? Are you calling to ask if I'm okay? Or to check if the swelling on your precious son's face has gone down? She said nothing. You're calling because Ethan cried to you, because your heart ached for him, and you wanted to get even on his behalf. You didn't call to find the truth. You called to yell at me. That's not. Then tell me, before you made this call, did you bother to ask Ethan why he came to my university in the first place? Silence again. I waited for 3 seconds. He didn't tell you, did he? He told you. I went to apologize to my brother, and he hit me. He didn't mention how he poked me in the chest and called me a nobody. He didn't tell you he threatened to have me kicked out of my research program. And he certainly didn't tell you he admitted the $1 million was a handout he convinced Warren to give me. Eleanor's voice was shaking for real now. He said that. Do you believe me? I asked. She didn't answer. You don't, I said. You don't believe he would ever say such things. In your eyes, he's forever the sweet, obedient boy who wouldn't harm a fly. And I'm forever the feral animal who grew up in the wild. The monster who hits people the moment he returns. I never said that. You thought it. A quiet sob came through the phone. I waited. After about 10 seconds, her voice returned, thick and nasal. Caleb, please come home. Come back and stay with us. Your mother. I want to talk to you properly. No, thank you. Caleb. Mrs. Hayes, here's a suggestion. I picked up my empty ramen bowl and walked to the trash can. Go home and ask Mr. Peterson exactly where he was standing when he saw me push Ethan. Then go ask Ethan about the cashmere sweater he was wearing that day. Ask him if there was any dust on the left shoulder after he landed. If he really tumbled down a marble staircase, there should be dust. If there isn't, I drop the bowl into the trash and clap my hands together. It means he took the sweater off before he faked the fall. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Ow. How did you know it was a cashmere sweater? Because I remember. It was a white cashmere sweater, and one of the buttons on the left cuff was loose. He landed on his left shoulder. If that sweater had actually scraped against the floor, the button would have torn off. Go find that sweater. See if the button is still there. Eleanor was silent. I hung up the phone. 3 days later, I hired a private investigator. His name was Sal. He was in his 40s, with a round, unassuming face that made him look more like an insurance salesman. He asked to meet at the 7-Eleven downstairs from my apartment. He bought 2 cups of chili from the hot food counter and slid one over to me. Mr. Hayes, what can I do for you? The Hayes family. The baby Switch, 18 years ago. He took a bite of a hot dog, chewing thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing. The Switch? I thought that was an accident. That's what we're going to find out. He glanced at me, then pulled a small notepad from his pocket. Go on. 18 years ago, Eleanor Hayes gave birth at Mercy General Hospital. On the same day, another woman had a baby there. The infants were swapped. I need to know who that other woman was, where she is now, and whether this was an accident or arranged. Sal scribbled a few notes. Easy enough to find, but it'll take time. Anything else? Ethan Hayes. I want to know what he's been up to, who he's meeting, his bank statements, any assets in his name. What do you suspect him of? I suspect him of everything. Sal smiled, popped the last piece of hot dog in his mouth, and stood up, brushing off his pants. All right, you'll hear from me in a week. A week later, we met at the same 7-Eleven. This time, he skipped the chili and slid a thick manila envelope across the table. I've got it. I opened the envelope and pulled out the documents. The first page was a photograph of a woman in her late 40s. She had a round face that shared a clear resemblance to Ethan. Brenda Miller, Sal said. Eleanor Hayes' distant cousin. 18 years ago, she gave birth to a son at Mercy General. Same day as Eleanor. The babies were switched. Accident or on purpose? Sal pulled a cigarette from his pocket, glanced at the no smoking sign on the wall, and reluctantly put it back. On purpose. Brenda was flat broke back then. Husband took off. She couldn't afford to raise a kid on her own. Meanwhile, her cousin marries into one of the wealthiest families in the state and has a son. You think she wasn't jealous? So she swapped them? She didn't have the access to do it herself. But she had another relative, a nurse working at the hospital. $25,000 was all it took. I turned to the next page. It was a bank statement for an account under Ethan Hayes' name. "Now look at this," Sal said, pointing to a specific transaction. $5 million. Wired to a company called Apex Investments. What's Apex Investments? A shell corporation. The listed director is some recent college grad. The address is an unrented office space. But the person who really controls the company, he pulled another sheet from the envelope. It was the company's registration information. Is Ethan himself. I kept reading. There were 3 more transfers, totaling nearly $20 million. All of it was Hayes Corporation money, funneled through layers of subsidiaries before finally landing in Ethan's personal accounts. He's embezzling from the company? I asked. Sal nodded. He's smart about it. Small transfers, one at a time, always routed through shell companies and subsidiaries of subsidiaries. You never spot it unless you were looking for it specifically. At this rate, the Hayes Corporation's cash flow will be crippled in another 6 months. I put all the documents back in the envelope. One more thing, Sal said. Ethan's been meeting frequently with a man named Marcus Thorne. Thorne is the CEO of Thorne Industries, the Hayes Corporation's biggest competitor. What are they planning? Don't know yet. But Marcus Thorne is a shark. He eats people for breakfast. Ethan's playing with him for one of 2 reasons. Either he's being used as a pawn, or he's the one holding the gun. Sal nodded grimly. I stood up, tucking the envelope under my arm. Mr. Hayes, Sal called out as I headed for the door. What are you going to do with all this? I'm going to sit on it. Sit on it. He sounded surprised. It's not time yet. I pushed open the door and stepped out into the evening. The envelope felt heavy in my hand. Ethan was gutting the Hayes family. Not out of hatred, but because he'd known all along that he was an impostor. He was planning to bleed the company dry and run before his identity was exposed. Warren Hayes paid $1 million to disown his real son, while the fake son he'd raised for 20 years was systematically destroying his entire legacy. I stood under a streetlight for a moment. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Eleanor. Just a few words, the sweater. The button is still on. I stared at the screen for 3 seconds, then shoved the phone back in my pocket. She checked the button, but she hadn't asked anything else. She checked the button, but she hadn't called to apologize. She just told me, the button is still on, meaning the sweater never touched the ground. Ethan didn't fall. She knew, but she wasn't saying a word. I shifted the envelope to my other hand and walked on, my pace quickening. I almost laughed. Eleanor checked the button and discovered Ethan was a liar. But she didn't confront him, didn't kick him out, didn't even add another word to her text. She just told me, I know, but I'm choosing to stay silent. That was the Hayes family. A fake son they'd raised for 20 years was robbing them blind, and the real son was cast out. The truth was sitting right in front of her, and she glanced at it, then deliberately looked away. I kept walking. No ruse. The truth isn't something you can force on people. You have to let it detonate on its own. The envelope sat in my apartment for 3 days. I did nothing, went to the lab, ran my experiments, lived my life. On the 3rd night, I scanned every document and sent them from an anonymous email address to Warren Hayes. Then I went to sleep. I woke up to over 40 missed calls. Warren, Eleanor, Chloe, and one unknown number that had called 12 times. I didn't call any of them back. At 9 a.m., in the main boardroom of the Hayes Corporation, I only found out what happened later that day. Sal called me, his voice electric with the excitement of a lottery winner. Mr. Hayes, it blew up. The whole thing just blew up. 10 minutes before the board meeting was scheduled to start, Warren Hayes opened his email and saw the anonymous message. The attachments contained 6 files: Brenda Miller's personal information, the wire transfer record for the nurse at the hospital, the bank statements for Ethan's shell company, proof of 4 separate embezzled payments totaling $20 million, photos of Ethan meeting with Marcus Thorne, and finally, the butler Mr. Peterson's bank account, showing a recent deposit of $100,000, with a memo line reading home construction. As Warren read the email, his hands started to shake. Mr. Davies, the lawyer, would later tell people that in his 15 years working for Warren, he had never seen his face turn so pale. It wasn't the pallor of anger. It was the chilling, bone-deep white of absolute shock. The board meeting began at 9. Warren ignored the agenda. He slammed a printed stack of the documents onto the boardroom table and told his assistant to get Ethan. When Ethan arrived, He was still wearing his trademark smile. He pushed open the door, nodded politely to the board members, and took a seat next to Warren. His voice was soft and gentle, as if asking what was for dinner. "Dad, what's so urgent?" Warren didn't speak. He just pushed the stack of papers toward him. Ethan looked down. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10. His smile remained, but the color drained from his face, leaving it as white as the paper in his hands. His fingers didn't move, but the nail beds went from pink to a deathly pale. "Dad, what is this?" Warren's voice was dangerously low. "You can't read. I don't understand." Ethan pushed the papers back, lifting his head, the smile plastered back on. "Dad, is someone trying to set me up? This has to be fake. There's no way I would ever." "Who is Brenda Miller to you?" Ethan's smile finally cracked. "I don't know anyone by that name." "She's your mother." Warren's voice didn't rise, but each word landed like a nail being hammered into the table. "Your biological mother. Eleanor's distant cousin. 18 years ago, she paid a nurse $25,000 to swap you with my son." The boardroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Ethan stared down, his lips trembling, his chin trembling, his entire face contorting. "Dad," his voice fractured like shattered glass. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I'm being framed. I'm your son." Warren just looked at him. "And the $20 million?" Warren asked. Ethan's sobbing stopped for a split second. "Were you framed for that, too?" Ethan's mouth hung open, tears still streaming down his face, but the sounds had stopped. "Dad, don't call me Dad." Those 4 words were like 3 knives. Ethan froze completely. The tears were still there, the corners of his mouth still turned down in that practiced look of anguish, but something underneath had shifted. The fear was still present, but beneath it, a new layer had surfaced, cold, hard, like a frozen river. "When did you find out?" Warren asked. Ethan didn't answer. "When did you find out you weren't my son?" Silence. The air conditioner hummed on. Suddenly, Ethan laughed. It was a quiet, strangled sound that seemed to crawl up from deep in his throat. He looked up, tear tracks still wet on his cheeks, but his mouth was stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. The combination of tears and laughter was more grotesque than crying. Warren asked again, "When did you know?" "Know what?" Ethan's voice was different now. Not gentle, not broken, but flat and dead as a calm sea. "That I'm not your son? That I was switched at birth? That I've been living in your house for 20 years as a complete fraud?" He stared at Warren, the expression in his eyes utterly transformed. There was no more hurt, no more fear. Only the chilling indifference of a man who'd been backed into a corner and had nothing left to lose. "I've known since I was 15. Warren flinched, as if he'd been struck. "My mother, Brenda Miller, she found me. She told me she was my real mom, that she'd seen me on TV, that she'd missed me for 15 years. She said they were too poor back then, that they couldn't afford me, so she swapped me with the Hayes' baby." Ethan leaned back in his chair, tilting his head to look at the ceiling. "She said she was sorry, but she didn't regret it. She said if it wasn't for her, I'd be working on some farm in the middle of nowhere. She said she gave me a chance at life." He lowered his head and looked directly at Warren. Was she wrong? Warren was speechless. "She gave me a chance. The Hayes family raised me for 20 years. You gave me the best food, the best clothes, the best schools. What I have to complain about? I should be grateful, right?" His voice started to rise. "But I'm not one of you. I'm a fake. I was stolen. The blood in my veins isn't Hayes' blood. It's the blood of that poor woman. This mansion I live in, the clothes I wear, the cars I drive, it's all stolen." His voice suddenly exploded into a roar. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Everyone in the room jumped at the sound. One of the board members sloshed hot tea onto the table. Ethan shot to his feet, sending his chair crashing to the floor. His face was beet red, veins bulging on his neck. Tears were still flowing, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of pure hatred. "Every morning, I wake up. I look in the mirror, and I think, who are you? Are you Ethan Hayes or Brenda Miller's son? Do you deserve this name? Do you deserve to live in this house?" His voice dropped again, becoming a low, guttural snarl. Warren stared at him. "So you decided to gut my company?" Ethan laughed again, a soft, chilling sound like a razor being dragged across velvet. "What was I supposed to do?" he said. "Wait for you to find out I was a fake and throw me out with nothing? I practically raised myself in your house for 20 years. What did you ever really give me? What did I give you? Warren's voice finally rose to a shout. Everything you wear, everything you eat, every dollar you've ever spent. Where do you think it came from? It came from the Hayes family, not from me. Ethan screamed back. Everything you gave me, you could take back in an instant. I'm not your son. I'm just a thief who stole your real son's place. The moment you found him, I knew my time was up. He was panting, his chest heaving. So I started taking as much as I could. It was Hayes' money anyway. It's not like I was stealing from a stranger. Warren watched him for a long, silent moment. How much did you take? You already know. Why are you asking? I'm asking you. How much? Ethan was quiet for a few seconds. 23 million. Someone in the room gasped. Warren nodded slowly. He picked up the documents and flipped to the last page, to the photo of Ethan with Marcus Thorne. And this? What were you planning with Thorne? Ethan glanced at the photo, his mouth twitching. He came to me. He said he knew who I really was. He said if I didn't cooperate with him, he would expose the whole thing. So you cooperated? I had no choice. No choice. Warren stood, slamming his palms on the table. The sound jolted everyone in the room. You had no choice, so you decided to stab your own family in the back. 23 million wasn't enough for you? You had to sell the entire company to an outsider. Ethan stumbled backward, hitting the wall. Warren walked around the table and stood in front of him. He was shorter than Ethan, but as he stood there, Ethan seemed to shrink. Listen to me, Warren said, his voice a low, menacing growl. You are not my son. You are Brenda Miller's son. You cost me 20 years, $23 million, and 18 years of my real son's life. You can never repay that debt. Ethan's lips trembled. As of today, you're no longer a part of this family. All your assets will be frozen. I will recover every cent of that 23 million. And as for your business with Marcus Thorne, Warren glanced at Mr. Davies. The lawyer stood and pulled a file from his briefcase. Mr. Hayes, based on the evidence we have gathered, during your time as an executive at the Hayes Corporation, you have engaged in embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, and insider trading. That's enough to put you in prison for 5 to 10 years. The color drained from Ethan's face, leaving it a sickly gray. His legs gave out, and he slid down the wall to the floor. His expensive suit was crumpled, his tie askew. He opened his mouth, but only a choked, gurgling sound came out, as if he were being strangled. Warren looked down at him in disgust. One more thing, Warren said. Your biological mother, Brenda Miller. I've already sent people to find her. She stole my son and ruined 18 years of his life. She will pay for that. Fresh tears streamed down Ethan's face. These were real, not an act, not from hatred, but the empty, desolate tears of a man who had lost everything. His lips trembled as he forced out a few words. Dad, I was wrong. I was so wrong, I told you. Don't call me Dad. Warren turned and walked back to his seat. Security. The door opened, and 2 guards appeared. Escort this person out. As of today, he is never to set foot in this building again. The guards moved to haul Ethan to his feet. His legs were jelly. He hung between them like a boneless puppet. As they dragged him to the door, he suddenly thrashed, looking back at the people in the room, his face a mess of tears and sweat. What about Caleb? He screamed, his voice raw and broken. Where's Caleb? Did he know all along? Is he enjoying this? No one answered him. The guards dragged him out. When the door closed, the only sound in the boardroom was the soft tick-tock of the wall clock. Warren sat in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. His face was still pale, but it was the ashen, hollowed-out look of a man who'd had the life sucked out of him. He looked up at the silent board members. Meeting adjourned. 11 people stood, gathered their belongings in silence, and filed out of the room. Their footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet, like a soft, insistent knocking on a door that would never open. The last person left, and the door clicked shut. Warren Hayes sat alone in the empty boardroom, staring at the document on the table. It was a photo of Ethan, smiling brightly at a company award ceremony, a trophy in his hand. The irony was crushing. That night, I was in my apartment when Eleanor called. Her voice was faint, like she was talking in her sleep. Caleb, you knew all along, didn't you? Yes. When did you find out? Last week. A long silence stretched over the line. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? She didn't answer. Another long pause. Your grandfather knows, she said finally. He flew back from Europe. Okay. He's furious. He kicked Warren out of the company. I was taken aback. What? Your grandfather said Warren is a disgrace to the Heir's name. He said a man who can't even protect his own flesh and blood has no right to run the family business. He stripped him of all his titles and duties. And Warren just accepted it. He didn't have a choice. Eleanor's voice was strangely empty. In this family, what your grandfather says goes. I leaned against the window, watching the streetlights below. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. Your grandfather wants to see you. See me? He said the heir to the Heir family can't be left out in the cold. I looked at my own reflection in the dark glass. Mrs. Heir, I said, a month ago, you paid me $1 million to disappear. Now that Ethan is gone and Warren has been disgraced, you suddenly remember you have a grandson? Caleb, tell the old man this. Caleb Heir died the day his son bought his bloodline for $1 million. The person who's alive now has nothing to do with the Heir family. I hung up the phone. A moment later, it buzzed with a text from her. Your grandfather says he'll wait. I tossed the phone on the table and fell back on my bed. 6th the day Arthur Heir came to see me. The sky was gray and overcast. I was in the lab when my phone rang. It wasn't an unknown number this time. It was Eleanor. I answered but didn't say anything. Caleb, your grandfather is downstairs from your apartment building. I froze. What? He insisted on coming himself. I told him to wait, to let me call you first, but he wouldn't listen. He said what? He said, if the grandson won't come to the grandfather, then the grandfather will come to the grandson. The line went dead. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, put the test tube I was holding back in its rack, told Professor Miller I had an emergency, and grabbed my jacket. When I got to my building, a vintage black Mercedes was parked out front. The car wasn't new, but it was immaculate. Standing beside it was a man in his 70s, his hands clasped behind his back, looking up at the rundown, 6-story building. Arthur Heir, the true patriarch of the family. He wore a simple dark gray jacket. His hair was completely white, but perfectly combed. The lines on his face were deep, like they'd been carved with a knife. He stood ramrod straight, a pillar of quiet authority that made the old building behind him look frail. A middle-aged man with a briefcase, likely an assistant, stood nearby. Eleanor was on the other side, wearing a plain trench coat, her face pale and without makeup. She looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. I walked toward them. Arthur turned his head. His eyes were startlingly clear for a man his age. He looked at me without blinking, as if identifying a long-lost artifact. Caleb, he asked. Yeah, you have a look, he said. You look like a Heir. I didn't reply. He glanced at the building. Shall we talk upstairs? Without a word, I turned and started up the stairs. He followed, his steps steady, his breathing even. Eleanor and the assistant trailed behind. Inside my apartment, Arthur stood in the doorway and surveyed the small, sparse room. This is where you live. It's fine. He walked in and sat down in the single armchair. Eleanor hovered in the doorway, her head bowed like a chastised child. The assistant quietly closed the door, remaining outside. It was just the two of us. He studied me for a moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward me. Open it. I did. It was a legal document. The title read, Heir Corporation Share Transfer Agreement. I flipped through the pages. All 35% of the company's shares under Arthur Heir's name were being transferred to Caleb Heir. I put the document back on the table. What is this? What belongs to the Heir family should be yours. I don't want it. Arthur's eyes narrowed slightly. Why not? I have no connection to the Heir family. Warren Heir bought it out for $1 million. His transaction is his business. I don't recognize it, Arthur said, his voice low but hard as granite. The Heir bloodline is not his alone to sell. The bloodline. I leaned against the table. Mr. Heir, what do you think that blood is worth? Your son sold it for $1 million. Your daughter-in-law ignored it for 18 years. Your granddaughter called me a bastard from the sticks. And the fake grandson you raised for 20 years tried to burn your empire to the ground. Is that what the Heir bloodline is all about? Arthur was silent. His hands rested on his knees, his fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm. You're right, he said, his voice softer now. The family has wronged you. It's not about being wronged. I corrected him. It's that you never saw me as a person. You brought me back not because you missed me, but because the precious Hayes blood couldn't be left in the wild. You kicked me out not because I did anything wrong, but because a fake was more convenient than the real thing. And you're here now, not to make amends, but because the fake is gone and the real one might still be useful. Arthur's fingers stopped tapping. Am I wrong? I asked. He was silent for a long time. No. The single word was quiet, but it landed with immense weight. He stood and walked to the window, his back to me. His posture was still straight, but his shoulders seemed to have lost some of their rigidity, like a column that had borne too much weight for too long. Warren is my son, he said, and I spoiled him. Whatever he wanted, I gave him. He wanted into the company. I let him in. He wanted to be CEO. I made him CEO. He wanted to cast out his own son. I wasn't there. If I had been, he paused. If I had been there, I would have stopped him too. After all, an outsider can't inherit our family business. He turned to face me. But I'm not here to apologize. Apologies are useless. I'm here to tell you, the Hayes family owes you a debt, and I intend to pay it. I told you I don't want it. What you want is your business. What I owe is mine. He took a key from his pocket and placed it on the table. This is for the main house. You can move back whenever you like. I didn't touch it. And one more thing, he said. I have dealt with Warren and Eleanor. Dealt with them. Warren is out of the Hayes Corporation. Not a penny, not a title. The assets he accumulated over the years belong to the family, and I've taken them all back. He's living in a rented apartment now, driving a cheap sedan. He can survive, but he can no longer play the king. The same goes for Eleanor. All assets under her name have been transferred to you. The houses, the cars, the bank accounts, they're all yours now. If she wants to spend a dime, she has to ask you. Just because you're the only man in the family, you have to do it. I frowned. You threw her out too? I'm teaching her that being a mother is more than just giving birth. Arthur's voice turned to ice. She raised Ethan for 20 years while abandoning her own son in some forgotten town. The day you came home, she called you a bastard. A mother like that does not deserve wealth. And Ethan, in custody, $23 million in embezzlement will keep him busy for a few years. His mother, Brenda Miller, has also been brought in for questioning. She won't escape justice for what she did. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Eleanor was still standing there, her face ashen. She looked up at me, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Arthur looked back at me. Caleb, the Hayes Corporation has no leader right now. I'm an old man. I can't hold it together for much longer. If you don't take it, the family legacy will crumble. And how is that my problem? He watched me for a moment, then a rare, fleeting smile crossed his face. You're as stubborn as your grandfather. He was the same way. Said he didn't want the family money. Went off to make it on his own. Came back 20 years later, broke and humbled. I'm not you. You are, he said, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. The Hayes blood is in you. You don't have to acknowledge me, or Warren, or Eleanor. That's your right. But the family's burden, that you must accept. Not because of blood, but because you have the ability. I didn't respond. He took a business card from his pocket and left it on the shoe cabinet by the door. Think about it. Call me when you're ready. I'm in no rush. I can wait. He turned to leave, then paused without looking back. Your foster father. I've sent people to bring him here. I don't feel right about him living alone in that town. I stiffened. You investigated him? I did. He's a good man. 1,000 times the man Warren is. His voice echoed up from the stairwell as he descended. From now on, he can live here in the city or stay in his town, whatever he wants. The Hayes family can afford to take care of him. His footsteps faded. Eleanor was still standing in the doorway, her eyes red, her lips trembling. She reached out a hand as if to touch my arm, then pulled it back. Caleb, her voice was broken. I am so sorry. I looked at her. Her face was still beautiful, but it was an empty beauty now, like a perfect painting that was just paint on canvas. Mrs. Hayes, I said, you weren't singing this tune a month ago when you were calling me a bastard. Tears streamed down her face. What happened that day? I was wrong. I shouldn't have what? Yelled at me? Or believed Ethan? You checked the button on the sweater. You knew he staged a fall, but you didn't call to apologize. You didn't confront him. You did nothing. You just sent a text saying the button was still there. Her mouth hung open as she wept silently. Do you know why? I continued. Because you didn't want the truth. You were afraid that if you knew the truth, you couldn't keep lying to yourself. The perfect son you raised for 20 years was a fraud, and the son you cast out was real. You couldn't accept that reality, so you chose silence. She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Mrs. Hayes, I don't hate you, but you don't deserve to be my mother. I closed the door. I heard a soft cry from the other side, then the sound of footsteps fading down the hall. I stood there, looking at the key and the share agreement on my table. Outside, the black Mercedes started its engine, pulled away from the curb, and disappeared into the flow of traffic. My phone rang. It was my foster dad. His voice was booming and cheerful. Caleb, some fellas are here to pick me up. Said you sent him. What's all this about? I smiled. Dad, just go with them. I've arranged a new place for you to live. I don't need a new place. I'm perfectly happy here. Is the pork rib soup as good as ever? Of course it is. Then come here and make it for me. There was a pause, then a hearty laugh on the other end. Alright, son. You just wait. 3 years later, Caleb Hayes inherited the Hayes Corporation. Ethan was sentenced to 5 years. I didn't go to the sentencing. Sal, my PI, gave me the news. He said Ethan broke down in court, sobbing, begging the judge for a lighter sentence because his own mother had betrayed him. The judge was unmoved. $23 million in embezzlement, plus conspiracy with Marcus Thorne. 5 years was already lenient. Brenda Miller got 3 years for her role in the baby swap. The nurse from the hospital, long since retired, was also charged and received a year of probation. After being exiled from the company, Warren Hayes rented a 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. He called Arthur hundreds of times. The old man never picked up. He tried calling Eleanor. She didn't answer either. I heard he eventually found a job as a consultant for a small firm, making about $20,000 a month. A good salary for most, but for him, it was practically poverty. Chloe moved to London. She left without a word to anyone, texting Eleanor only after her plane had taken off. When Eleanor tried to call back, the phone was off. Sal told me all of this. I never asked, but he seemed to think I should know. Eleanor's crisis came 3 months after Ethan's sentencing. I was in a meeting at the office. I had fully taken over the Hayes Corporation. After Arthur transferred his shares, he retired to the family estate to grow roses and watch birds, as he put it. I'd spent the first month cleaning up the mess Warren had left behind, and another month neutralizing the threat from Marcus Thorne. The company hadn't just survived. It was thriving, doing better than it ever had under Warren. The meeting was halfway through when my phone vibrated. It was Sal. I declined the call and continued. He called again. I declined again. The third time, I answered, keeping my voice low. What is it? Mr. Hayes, it's your mother. She's in trouble. I stiffened. What kind of trouble? She's at the Gilded Palace. What's that? Sal hesitated. It's a club. She was there, looking for a job. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of job? A hostess job. She went to interview with the manager, but they recognized her as the former Mrs. Hayes and turned her down. She's still there, refusing to leave, demanding to see the owner. You should probably get down here. I hung up, told the boardroom, meeting's over, and grabbed my jacket. The Gilded Palace was a massive, flashy nightclub on the east side of the city. Sal was waiting for me by the entrance. She's in a private room on the second floor, talking with the owner now. I pushed through the doors. On the second floor, Sal pointed toward a room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear a woman's voice from inside. I could do anything, really. Pouring drinks, talking with clients, singing. I even used to dance. It was Eleanor's voice. Another woman's voice, slick with a practiced, sleazy charm, replied, Mrs. Hayes, it's not that I don't want to help. But with your status, this place isn't exactly the Ritz. We can't afford to have you here. You should just go home. I don't have a status anymore. I just want a job. I'll do anything. Mrs. Hayes, don't call me Mrs. Hayes. I pushed the door open. 2 women were sitting inside. One was a heavily made-up woman in a red dress and a thick gold chain. The other was Eleanor. She had lost weight, but she was still beautiful. You could have told me she was 30 and I would have believed you. The moment she saw me, all the color drained from her face. The owner saw me too. She stood up, a fake smile plastered on her face. Sir, can I help you? Get out. Her smile froze. She glanced from me to Eleanor. then wisely decided to leave, pulling the door shut behind her. Now it was just the two of us. The muffled beat of the club's music pulsed through the walls like a nervous heart. Eleanor stared at the floor, refusing to look at me. She was twisting her hands, her nails digging into her own skin, leaving white marks. I stood in front of her. "What are you doing?" She didn't speak. "I asked you what you were doing." Her voice was a whisper, nearly lost in the music. "Looking for a job." "What kind of job?" "Any kind." "Serving drinks to strangers?" Heir. "You used to live in a mansion, drive luxury cars, and have everyone call you Mrs. Hayes. Now you're here, trying to be a hostess?" Her shoulders trembled. "The former Mrs. Hayes, working as a club hostess. What do you think that does to the family's reputation?" She snapped her head up. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Her lips trembled as she bit down hard on the lower one. "The family," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "What do I have to do with the family anymore? Your grandfather threw me out. Your father wants nothing to do with me. Your sister is gone. Ethan is in prison. I have nothing. I don't even have a place to live. I'm almost 50 years old. I have never worked a single day in my life. I don't know how to earn money. I don't know how to survive. Do you have any idea what that feels like? So your solution is to come here? To let strange men buy you drinks and grope you?" Her face flushed with shame. "I wouldn't let them. You wouldn't." I took a step closer. "When you were Mrs. Hayes, people showed you respect. Now, you're nothing. Sitting in this room, dressed like that." Her lips trembled, speechless. "Do you know what the going rate for a hostess at the Gilded Palace is? $1,000 a night. Is that what you're worth, Eleanor? The former lady of the Hayes mansion, worth $1,000. The tears finally fell. "Then what am I supposed to do?" Her voice shattered. "What else can I do? I have no money, nowhere to live, no one. I can barely afford to eat. You tell me, what am I supposed to do?" She sank to the floor, covering her face, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs that she tried to muffle with her hands. I stood over her, looking at the top of her head. I could see a few strands of gray in her hair, stark under the dim club lights. "Come home with me." She looked up, her face a mess of tears and smeared makeup. That face was a wreck, but it was still beautiful. It was a beauty that was bone deep, something that couldn't be washed away. "What?" she asked. "Come home with me. I'll give you a place to stay." She just stared, her mouth open, tears still clinging to her lashes. She looked like a drowning person who'd just spotted the shore, but couldn't believe it was real. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you're my mother." The words surprised me as much as they did her. Eleanor froze. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The tears started again, but this time they fell silently, tracing paths through her ruined makeup. "But don't get the wrong idea," I said coolly. "I'm not doing this because you're my mother. I'm doing this because you're a public embarrassment to the Hayes family." Her tears stopped. "I haven't forgotten that you called me a bastard. I haven't forgotten that you threw me out. I haven't forgotten that you knew the truth and chose to ignore it. But you're a Hayes, and a Hayes does not get pawed at by strangers in a place like this." Her lips started to tremble again. "You'll come back with me, but you'll have to work." "Work? Doing what?" "Dancing, and all the house cleaning." Her eyes went wide. "You said you used to dance, right? You'll dance for me. Every day. When I'm home, you dance. If you do well, you get a bonus. If you do poorly, I dock your allowance." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. What are you saying? Dancing. Is that hard to understand? You want a job? This is your job. You will dance for me for 1 hour every day. When I'm not home, you practice." A strange, complicated blush spread across her face. Her voice rose, sharp but without any force behind it. "I am your mother. If you were my mother, you shouldn't have stayed," I said, turning for the door. "Are you coming or not?" She stood frozen. I looked back. "Fine. Stay here. Keep looking for a job. If this place won't take you, try the next one. Sooner or later, some club owner will say yes." Her face went pale. "And when some drunk starts getting handsy, just make sure you don't tell him your name is Hayes. The family can't afford that kind of shame." Her lips trembled, her eyes reddening again. She stood there, her hands twisting the fabric of her dress. "I'll go." She walked past me, her head bowed. I followed her out of the room. The owner was standing at the end of the hall. She saw us, and her expression was a mixture of curiosity and relief. Mrs. Hayes, she won't be back, I said, giving the owner a final look. Ever. The owner nodded, wisely saying no more. Outside, a cool breeze carried the smell of street food. Eleanor stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath, her shoulders slowly relaxing. My car was parked down the street. I opened the passenger door for her. She glanced at the car, then at me. When did you get a car? Last month. She got in without another word. I closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, and started the engine. The drive was silent. She stared out the window, her hands folded primly in her lap. Your apartment, she finally said, her voice small. Which room will I stay in? The one next to mine. It's empty. Does it have a bed? No. You'll have to buy one. I don't have any money. I'll deduct it from your living expenses. She fell silent again. When we arrived at my building, I parked the car and led her upstairs. I lived in a simple 2-bedroom. I used the master, and the other room had become a storage space for junk. I opened the door and started moving the boxes into the hallway. This is it. Eleanor stood in the doorway, looking at the small, bare room. It had a desk and nothing else. Not even curtains. You can go buy a bed and curtains tomorrow. There's a furniture store a 10-minute walk from here. She nodded. I turned to go to my room, but she called my name. Caleb. I stopped. Thank you. I didn't look back. Dancing starts tomorrow. 8 a.m. sharp, in the living room. Don't be late. I closed my door and lay down on my bed. The ceiling was white. My phone buzzed. A text from Arthur Hayes. Heard you brought Eleanor home. I typed a single letter back, yes. What's she doing? Dancing. There was a 30-second pause. Then his reply came. Just that. I tossed my phone on the nightstand and rolled over. The orange glow of the streetlight seeped through a crack in my curtains. Dancing. I smiled to myself. The former lady of the Hayes mansion, now my personal dancer. No one would ever believe it. But who cared? At least now, she was where I could see her. I closed my eyes. 8 a.m. living room. Don't be late. The next morning at 7:55, I opened my bedroom door to find Eleanor already standing in the living room. She had changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail. Her face was bare, free of makeup. The morning light streamed in through the window, illuminating her. She heard me and turned. Her eyes were a mixture of nervousness and resignation. I haven't danced in a long time, she said. It might not be very good. Let's see it first. I sat down on the sofa, leaned back, and crossed my legs. She took a deep breath and moved to the center of the room. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speaker, and music filled the small space. It was an old classical piece, probably from her youth. She lifted her arms, rose onto her toes, and turned. Her movements were rusty, her steps a little unsure. But she was trying, pouring all her concentration into each pose. Her ponytail swung back and forth. I watched her, 53 years old, but as she danced, none of that seemed to matter. She wasn't Mrs. Hayes anymore. She wasn't the woman who had screamed at me from the top of a marble staircase. She was just a middle-aged woman in sweatpants, dancing awkwardly, but with a fierce determination. The music ended. She stood in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. She looked at me, her expression tentative, hopeful. Well, she asked. It was terrible. The light in her eyes dimmed. But it was better than yesterday. She looked up, surprised. The way you looked at the gilded palace yesterday was 100 times uglier than this. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Same time tomorrow. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. I stood up and went back to my room. As the door clicked shut, I heard a soft, quiet laugh from the living room. 3 months later, the Hayes Corporation released its quarterly report. Net profits were up 30%. Professor Miller's Research Institute signed a major partnership with the company. The day the new project launched, Arthur called me. You're doing good work, son. Thanks. Is your mother still dancing? Yeah, she's getting better. She always was a beautiful dancer, he chuckled. That's why your grandfather agreed to let your father marry her, you know? He saw her dance. I was silent. Come visit an old man sometime. It gets lonely out here. I will. After hanging up, I stood at my office window, looking down at the city below. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. What do you want for dinner tonight? I'm going grocery shopping. I thought for a moment, then replied, pork ribs. I can't make them like your foster dad did, but I'll try. If it's bad, I'm docking your allowance. I know. I looked at the screen and felt the corner of my mouth lift into a small smile. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and red. Ethan was in a cell. Warren was in a rented apartment. Chloe was somewhere in London. And Eleanor was at the supermarket picking out pork ribs. I picked up the file on my desk and turned to the next page. The plan for the next quarter of the Hayes Corporation was already written.